All right, so my head disappeared because I couldn't figure out how to make it not cover things up. So just finished watching the video on how vaccines work, and I want to talk a little bit about why should we care about vaccines. So they talked a little bit about this in the video as far as herd immunity, or basically being protecting other people. This is something that we can do that is compassionate to other individuals. It doesn't just protect us, but it protects other people as a whole. So let's take a look here at a breakdown of how immunizations can work. So up here at the top, we've got the little key. So the blue people are people who are not immunized but are still healthy. Yellow is immunized, so they've had the vaccination and they're healthy. And red is not immunized, sick and contagious. So they didn't get their vaccines, they have gotten the disease, and they're passing it on to other people. So this is that herd immunity. You may have heard of herd immunity in the news because some people are talking about, well, we should just use herd immunity for COVID. The thing is when you do that, so here we've got our first population, and you get a couple people who are sick. Nobody in this first population is immunized, which is what's going on right now with COVID. We don't have a vaccine yet for this. And so when you don't have a vaccine, or you have a large number of people who are not immunized, the disease is going to pass through that population and spread, especially if it's something very contagious like, COVID, the flu, measles, and so forth, to the point where almost everyone in the population is sick and contagious. And for some diseases, this isn't so much of a problem, like the common cold, because it's not going to be very much of an impact as far as health goes. It's going to make you feel a little miserable, but that's about it. Other diseases, it can be fatal. So, especially depending on what age group you belong to, because some of the diseases that we're working on vaccines or have vaccines for are going to be more impactful depending on if you are in younger age brackets, older age brackets, if you are immunocompromised, so you've got diseases, or if you're pregnant, things like that. So let's see what happens when you have some people who are immunized, so they've gotten their vaccinations. So you can see here, we've got the same infection rate, so we start with 2. We've got the same number of people in the population, but now we have a couple of people who got their vaccinations. Well, we get the same sort of result as far as only a couple of people don't end up ill. The people who had the vaccines end up not ill in this case, but everybody else still ends up with the disease. And so this is not much better of a situation than our first one, because a majority of the population is still going to end up with that illness. The last one down here, this one, we've got almost everyone has their vaccines. We've got the same thing. We start off with 2 people who are sick, and only one of those individuals that did not have their vaccines ends up with the illness. And this is because all of these individuals who have the vaccine aren't able to contract and pass that disease on, whatever it might be. So you might be wondering, okay, so if we're going to use vaccines, why aren't all of these blue individuals vaccinated? Well, not everybody can get vaccinated. So there are a few reasons why you may not be able to get vaccinated. One, you may be immunocompromised. So individuals, for example, who have had transplants, organ transplants like liver, heart, and so on, those individuals are on immunosuppressive drugs, meaning that their immune system is actually suppressed, turned down, if you want to think about it. You know, most of us have our immune system turned up to like 9 or 10. You know, most of the time, these guys have got it turned down to like 4, because otherwise their body would attack their transplant. So they aren't able to get vaccines. Children under the age of 2 are not able to get vaccines, so they can still be exposed to these diseases. And then there are also individuals who can't get the vaccines because they're allergic to the components. So until recently, a lot of our vaccines were egg-based, meaning that we used chicken eggs to grow the viruses. And if you have an egg allergy, you can't use the vaccine because you would be actually injecting egg proteins straight into that individual, and that can send them into an allergic reaction. It can even be a deadly allergic reaction. So there are reasons for people not to be able to get those vaccines, and by a majority of the population having the vaccine, it protects those individuals, and that's what we mean by herd immunity. By having those vaccinations, you get the immunity from the vaccine and end up protecting those individuals who were not able to get the vaccine in the first place. So what can they protect us from? What kinds of things can these vaccines protect us from? And they mentioned a few in the video, but I've got a list of most of the vaccines that are currently available. There are other ones that are on the way, including possible COVID vaccines. There's still speculation on when a COVID vaccine may be available to the public. But all of these here, so cholera, flu, dengue, and so on, these are all current vaccines that are available on the market today. And you likely have had one or more of these vaccines. We usually start vaccinating around age 2. Some of these vaccines require more than one injection in order to work. So they need what we call a booster. But what they do is just like what you saw in the video. We expose you to part of an organism or the whole inactive organism, and your body basically gets trained, your acquired immune system gets trained on how to protect you from it without making you sick with that actual disease. So, for example, flu, that's the one that you have to get every year. And most people wonder, well, why do we have to get a new flu vaccine every year? This is because some of the viruses, which most of them on here are viruses, some of these viruses mutate and mutate fairly regularly, and flu is one of them. And there are multiple types of flu. So there's A types and B types. And so right now they are working to make the best determination of which 4 flu viruses they think will be a problem next year, and they're going to start developing that flu vaccine for next year. Very often they get it right. Every once in a while they miss because they're taking their best guess. We can't put all of them in the vaccine because we wouldn't be able to basically afford to make it, but also there's just too many variants of the flu viruses. So they pick those top 4 that they think are going to be make up their next flu season, and that's what goes in the vaccine. And so when you get that vaccine, you get inactivated flu viruses, and your body goes to work setting up those B cells, and the B memory cells and so forth to train on them. Now, most people are like, well, when I get the flu shot, I feel sick, right? I just feel horrible. But if you think about it, you only feel that way for a day or so. And if you've ever had the full-blown flu, you feel miserable with the flu for, days to a week or more. And the symptoms that you have for the flu are much different. The reason why you kind of feel if you want to think of that like icky, you have a little bit of a fever, you might feel a little achy. That means that the vaccine is working to get your body's defenses set up, because those are your body's defenses working. Whenever we get an infection, one of the things that our body does is raise our body temperature. And so that's why you get a raised temperature. But if you take your temperature is only generally going to be a degree or two above normal, if that. You just feel a little warmer. So what you're feeling after you get your flu shot is not the flu, it's your body's acquired immune system mounting that defense, and that's why it goes away in a day or so, because it then turns itself back down. If you're wondering what the little stars are that are on here, the ones that I starred, those are actually vaccines that are set up a little differently than the other ones. So pretty much all of the vaccines I have listed here are created by taking a part of the actual virus or the whole inactivated virus and putting that in the vaccine. These guys with stars on them aren't actually viruses. They're not caused by a virus. They're caused by a bacteria. And so we can't inject bacteria, but what we do instead is we inject a protein that bacteria makes that our body will identify, or a little bit of the toxin that bacteria makes that our body can identify and set up an acquired immune reaction to. So for example, tetanus is one that we basically give you a little bit of the toxin that tetanus makes, so that way your body can mount a response so that if it sees anything making that toxin, it can go after it and destroy it. So, because there's no way for us to really give you the bacteria for these guys, but we can give your immune system something that they'll make that's an identifier that they can go after. So, all right, so that's the end of the immune system and the end of the biology chapter.